I never imagined I'd come home to find my wife with another man. The scene was surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My heart raced with rage and heartbreak. She stood there guilty and nervous, while he looked shocked and scared. I confronted them, my anger boiling over. I pushed him out of my house, the betrayal too much to bear. She cried, begged for forgiveness, but I was done. This is my story of love turned to betrayal and the revenge that followed. Stay tuned to witness the chaos unfold. I got home from work early that Wednesday because I wanted to change into a fresh shirt before dinner. It was a business dinner with some contractors who wanted to hire my firm for demolition. Joyce wasn't coming with me. I didn't care much about my appearance, but I wanted a clean shirt for comfort. I sweat a lot at work. I drove up and saw Eileen's car. Eileen is Joyce's sister. We don't get along, and we both admit it. So, seeing her there was not a pleasant surprise. Luckily, I didn't plan to stay long. When I walked into the kitchen from the garage, I saw Eileen, but not Joyce. I threw my briefcase on the countertop and stared at Eileen. She was older than Joyce and quite beautiful, but I didn't like her personality. "What are you doing here? Are you here to gloat with your sister about my mistake?" "Joyce asked me to babysit while you both went to dinner. I didn't expect you back until 9 or 10 p.m. Why so early? Was dinner canceled? Did you get fired?" "Maybe it's my company, you fool. So who's going to fire me? I just want to change into a clean shirt. What do you mean we're both leaving? Joyce isn't coming with me." At that moment, Joyce entered the kitchen, all dressed up. Her black dress with a deep V-neck was too revealing for a casual night out with friends. Her makeup was much heavier than usual. I noticed she wasn't wearing a bra. Her whole appearance bothered me. She stopped when she saw me, her face darkening. She hadn't planned to see me tonight. She stared at me. "What are you doing here? You should be at dinner with clients." She seemed nervous, and her look was strange. "What the hell are you up to?" I asked. "You didn't want to go to dinner with me, but now you're going out dressed like that. Who are you going with? You don't dress like that for your friends." "It's none of your business. I have my own plans." The doorbell rang. She flinched and looked scared. "I'll open it. You just stay here." She headed to the front door, and I followed, curious about her reaction. I stopped in the hallway when she opened the door. She blocked it and said something, gesturing with her hands. Then a man in a suit and tie walked past her into the hallway. He smiled at her and leaned in to kiss her, but she turned away. He looked surprised, then noticed me. I walked into the hallway. "Who is this and why is he here?" I asked Joyce. "This is Ron Mason. I work with him and he came to take me to dinner. We have plans. Ron, this is Russell, my husband." "Nice to meet you," he said, extending his hand. I ignored it. I looked at Joyce and realized what was happening. It was a date. Ron knew about our problems and was hoping for good luck that night. I looked at Joyce, saw her nervous hands, and knew I wasn't going to let that happen. She should have known this. "I'm sorry you came here for nothing, Ron, but my wife won't come with you. She shouldn't have misled you." Joyce was furious. "I'll go with whoever I want. You can't stop me." She turned to get her coat. I walked up to Ron, stood in front of him, and said quietly, "Get out of my house right now. My wife will not go with you today or any other day while she's my wife. Leave now or I will throw you out." "Damn it, Russ, if you don't leave Ron alone, I'm calling the police," Joyce yelled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Call 911, I said. "Order an ambulance for Mr. Mason and then you can call the police for me." I turned to Ron and said, "Is she worth it? Decide now. You have 10 seconds, then I'll beat you to a pulp if you're still here." Even though he was taller and heavier than me, he looked uncertain. I raised my wrist and looked at my watch. Ron moved towards the door. He was out in 5 seconds. I smiled and turned to Joyce. "This is not an acceptable choice, Joyce. I gave you 2 choices, divorce or forgiveness. There is no third option. If this is what you want, I will file the papers tomorrow. Either way, you will not date. I will not allow it while you're married to me." I walked past her and went upstairs to change into a clean shirt. My heart was pounding. If I had to fight Mr. Mason, I might have killed him. I was capable of it, and Joyce knew. I was glad I didn't have to find out. I splashed water on my face, applied some cologne, and got ready for dinner. I went downstairs and found Joyce and Eileen in the kitchen. Joyce was still angry. You humiliated me in front of... I stopped and looked at her, raising my hand in a threatening gesture. This made her go silent. I felt a lot of anger inside. I wanted to hit her, but held back. I took a deep breath and lowered my hand. It had been years since I felt this angry, but it came back easily. I winced as I regained control. I wanted to shout, but just walked past her. I took my briefcase and keys from the wall and went to the door. I almost left, but stopped and turned around. I was still shaking, but now in control. I stared at her and said, "I'll say it again. If you go ahead with your plans when I leave, I'll take it as your choice and your answer. Divorce or forgiveness. There's no third option. Trying to get back at me is like asking for a divorce. Think carefully, Joyce." With that, I left and went to the hotel for my meeting. I wasn't looking forward to the dinner, but it was necessary. When it ended, I paid, thanked the waiters, and headed home. It was almost 9:30, later than I wanted, but it couldn't be helped. The dinner went well. We agreed on a few proposals, and I'll finalize the details tomorrow. It was worth it. The work will bring good profit and jobs for many of my employees. I was in a good mood when I got home. I saw Eileen's car was still there and shrugged. I walked in and saw Eileen sitting with a cup of coffee. "Why are you still here? Has Joyce gone somewhere? Are the kids asleep?" "Yes," to both questions. "She told me to tell you she'll do whatever she wants and you'll have to live with it," Eileen said, looking unhappy. I thought about it for a minute and then asked, "Can you stay the night? Do you need to be home by a certain time?" She seemed surprised, but then smiled. "I can stay." "What are you up to?" she asked sarcastically, but I just needed her to stay. "I'm leaving, so you'll have to stay until she gets back. Tell her my lawyer will contact her and let her know where I can be found. I'll start the divorce process tomorrow morning." I went upstairs to our bedroom and packed for a few nights. I could pick up the rest of my things while she was at work. I gathered my toiletries and clothes and packed my suitcase. I was ready. I sat on the bed and let myself cry for a minute. I was heartbroken, realizing my marriage was over. I hoped Joyce would understand how hurt I was. I had made a terrible mistake and regretted it, but I couldn't fix it. I wiped my tears, stood up, and left the bedroom, maybe for the last time. I walked down the hall and looked into my children's room. This moment was the hardest. I stood there, feeling a tear fall before quickly wiping it away. I turned and went downstairs, carrying my suitcases, trying to forget that I was leaving my children. I didn't know where I would go, but I could find a room for the night and look for a place later. I took my computer from the office and carried everything into the kitchen. Eileen was on the phone, likely trying to call Joyce but having trouble. "Tell Joyce that someone will contact her at work tomorrow to find out her lawyer's name. Tell her to get a good one because she'll need it. I will fight for custody of the children. I'm not being nice anymore. She made her choice. She will have to live with it. Good night. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. But isn't this what you always wanted? Enjoy." "I'm really sorry, Russ. No, this isn't what I wanted, but you probably won't believe me." I tried to warn her, but she didn't listen. "Please don't do anything crazy. Please." With that, I walked out of my home and my marriage. It started almost 14 years ago. I was young, confident, and had just returned from the army after 8 years. I learned to kill with my bare hands and plant explosives. I was very good at it, and my captain begged me to stay, but I wanted to start earning money and enjoy life. I returned to Youngstown, Ohio, where I was born. I got a job as a blaster for a mining company in southern Ohio. It was a well-paid job because most experts didn't stay long. They often blew themselves up. But I was very good and thought nothing could happen to me. Within a few months, I was making almost $2,000 a week, planting explosives in 3 different mines. I was always in demand. The bosses knew I was safe and could blast rock with less explosives than most. Although I made good money, I wanted more, so I saved almost everything I earned. Once I had saved over $20,000, I decided to look for better opportunities. I started working for a demolition construction company and made as much money as before, but now I worked under the open sky instead of in muddy, rocky trenches. I found the work fascinating and learned from the experienced guys. There was a method for laying explosives, and for some reason these methods made sense to me when I saw the drawings of any building. I quickly became one of the leading experts in planting charges. My dream was to have my own company specializing in all types of demolition. You'd be surprised how many types there are. I knew them all and how to do them. I worked for 2 more years before taking the plunge. I got my license, talked to an attorney who helped me register, and started Cranston Demolitions, Inc. I was Russell Cranston, 30 years old, with my own company. Within 3 years, I was solvent and making more money than I knew what to do with. I hired a few good people, all with military experience in demolitions, and began to expand. We took jobs all over the state and then the country. I started using my team for travel and project management. As a former master sergeant, I knew how to delegate work. I had some free time and started visiting local bars. Not to get drunk. I never liked that feeling and couldn't handle much alcohol, so I usually just drank beer and looked at the girls. That's how I met Joyce Kenyon. Joyce was one of 5 girls who walked into Clancy's Bar and Grill one evening. I didn't notice the other girls because I only had eyes for Joyce. She was beautiful, tall, slender, with long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a face like an angel. She looked like she came from money. I was hooked. I finished my beer and asked her to dance. She liked me, and we danced almost all evening. We were interrupted a few times by other guys, but she always came back to me. I got her name and number before she left and called her 2 days later. We agreed to meet, and I picked her up from her house. This was the first surprise. Her family was wealthy and lived in a very prestigious part of the city. I wasn't from that area. I hadn't gone to college and spent most of my time in the army blowing up things. I had doubts we would succeed, but Joyce and I got along great. After a whirlwind year, I asked her to marry me, and she accepted. We went to her parents, who took the news better than I expected. Her father respected me when he found out I had my own company, but her sister Eileen hated me for some reason. I didn't care. Joyce said yes, and that's all that mattered. I had enough money saved, so we bought a nice house and settled down to start a family. Joyce had no problems getting pregnant, and we had a baby almost immediately. She wanted 2 children while we were still young. 12 months later, Julie was born, and we had 1 child of each gender. We were happy with our new family for the next 7 years. We had an ideal life. I loved my children and my wife, and she seemed as happy as I was. My company continued to grow, and we started taking jobs overseas. I hired more ex-military personnel, and they did most of the traveling and organizing. I checked and signed all the plans, only going to particularly sensitive or complex jobs. The business grew, and I made more money. When both children started school, Joyce took a job at a real estate agency as a secretary and receptionist. She wanted to do something outside the house and interact with people, not just other mothers talking about kids. She liked the job, and the hours were convenient, allowing her to be home when the children returned from school. 5 years passed, and in the summer of 2006, I took a job in Brazil. It was to demolish a mountain to free up land for some very wealthy Europeans who wanted the privacy Brazil offered. We had done this in California, so it was easy, but they asked me to handle it personally for the amount of money they offered. It was worth it, so I went to Brazil. Joyce stayed home, so I took one of my team members. My only condition was not to stay more than a week. I stayed a week and flew home on a chartered plane provided by my hosts on Friday. I spent the weekend with my family and returned on Monday morning. Joyce understood. I continued this for 2 weeks. In the 3rd week, when the work was completed, my clients had a farewell party. I wanted to say goodbye to several friends I made there. We had a good time, and I liked their local wine. By the end of the evening, I was as drunk as I had ever been. I ended up spending the night with a young woman who had shown interest in me from the start. I wasn't too drunk to remember what we did. I apologized to her the next morning, but she said she didn't regret anything. I was sorry, and the thought of what I had done haunted me all morning until I vomited in the bathroom. When I returned home, I tried to forget about it, but the guilt wouldn't let me rest. I started losing sleep, lost my appetite, and eventually made mistakes at work. I decided to tell Joyce what happened and ask for her forgiveness. If I had talked to someone who had been through this, I might have handled it differently, but I didn't. That Friday, I came home and told her after the children were asleep. It didn't go well. Joyce, I need to tell you something. It's been hard to keep this a secret. I have to be honest. What's wrong, Russ? Problems with the company? Did someone make a mistake or something? Well, it was my mistake. On the last night in Brazil, I went to a party and got very drunk. I only drank wine, but their wine is much stronger than I thought. I spent the night with a girl at the party. I didn't realize what I was doing until I woke up the next morning. I barely knew her, but she followed me the whole time I was there. I'm sorry. It didn't mean anything, and I was too drunk to remember the details, but I had to tell you." Joyce looked at me like I had hit her. She stood up, crossed her arms, and stared at me with tears streaming down her face. I panicked and tried to hug her, but she pushed me away. She stepped back, her eyes burning through her tears. "You son of a bitch, you traitor! How could you do this to us? How could you do this to me?" She was furious, her anger overcoming her shock and tears. "What about the children? Did you think about them or me? Did you remember you have a wife and children?" No, you didn't think about us. But I told you I was drunk. You know I can't drink. That's why I almost never do it. It was just wine. I didn't know it was so strong. I got drunk and didn't realize what I did. You have to understand this. I didn't want this. You know I love you and the children more than anything. No, you do not love. You couldn't love and still do what you did." She cried and rushed around the kitchen. She was much angrier than I expected. I knew she would be angry, but not this much. This was beyond what I thought possible. I remembered this much later. "I'm going to bed. You sleep in the guest room. I don't want you near me. Good night." She ran upstairs to the bedroom. I heard the door slam and then silence. The weekend went very badly. Joyce didn't talk to me, and she and the kids left early Saturday morning. I didn't know where they went. I wasn't invited. I wandered around the house doing random chores, waiting for them to return. They came back later. "Where have you been all day? You didn't even leave me a note. What if I needed to find you?" I was a little angry. "What do you care about?" She smirked and walked away. So this is how it would be. I guess I'd have to endure this until she either forgives me or something else happens. I probably deserved it. So I tried to stay busy and not give her a reason to yell at me. Joyce continued her punishment for another 2 weeks before she finally broke down and spoke to me. It was after dinner, and the children had gone to bed. I was sitting in the living room reading some documents Jerry, my assistant, had written. They were about demolition work on 15-story buildings in New York. It was a good offer, and I agreed with the estimate. I had just put my initials on it when she came in and sat down across from me. "We need to talk." She still looked angry, but at least she wanted to talk, so I responded in kind. "Okay, I agree, we need to talk. I've said everything I need to say. The next step is up to you. I've made a few decisions. I'm still mad at you, and I need to find a way to forgive you. I don't know what that way is, but whatever it is, you might not like it. I just want to warn you in advance." She had a smile on her face, but her gaze was unkind. It made me angry, but I wanted to know what she was up to. "I don't quite understand what you mean. I don't care what you want to do to deal with your anger, but there are things I won't accept, no matter what. You know what I'm talking about." I wanted to make sure there was no chance of her cheating for revenge. I made a mistake, but it wasn't intentional. I told her this. I would never accept her deliberate betrayal. "You're not in a position to tell me what I can or can't do. And anyway, if you did it, why shouldn't I? Tell me that. What I did without knowing. It was wrong then, and it would be wrong for you too. I would never have done it knowingly. I was drunk and made a mistake. That's why I don't accept it. If you want me to forgive you, you might have to accept that I can do the same thing. It would be fair. You have to accept it." She still had that grin on her face, and it scared me. She was seriously considering cheating on me. I had to make her understand that I couldn't accept it, that it would be just as wrong. "I understand that you're angry and hurt. I know you want to hurt me, so I feel the same as you, but 2 wrongs don't make a right. If you do what I think you're planning, it won't be right. Let me put it this way. If what I did makes you so angry, then it's important to you. So if you do it, what will it tell me? If you cheat on me with another man, our marriage will be over. I will not accept your betrayal." Joyce stared at me, her lips pressed together in a straight line. She was furious and ready to explode. She struggled with this for a few minutes before standing up and staring at me. "You're a hypocrite. You want me to forgive you and not do anything to make you understand how I feel? If I understand you correctly, you plan to cheat on me to make me feel as hurt as you do. Listen carefully. If you do this, our marriage will end. You need to either forgive me and let me prove I can be a good husband and father, or we get divorced and go our separate ways. I love you and our family with all my heart, but I will not tolerate betrayal. I won't accept it." Joyce's face turned white with anger. She struggled before speaking again. "You can't tell me what to do. You messed up, and now you'll have to pay. Be ready to accept whatever I do. You have no choice." I stood up and looked her straight in the eyes. I have a choice. It's called divorce. Your choice is whether or not I do it. I will never accept your cheating for any reason. I stared at her, feeling both anger and worry. As she turned and walked away, I wondered if Joyce was hiding something and using this situation to cover it up or take advantage of it. The thought made me sick. Several weeks passed like this. I hoped things would calm down. I asked her to come with me to a dinner with 2 clients who wanted me to demolish some buildings. I told her it was a good business deal and would make us a lot of money. I thought it might interest her, but she quickly rejected the idea. I don't want to go to dinner with you and your construction pigs. All you'll talk about is explosions, and I'll be bored to death. Go have some fun. Maybe you'll get lucky and find some lady to go home with. Those construction pigs, as you call them, paid for everything we have. It seemed fine when you wanted a new kitchen or a trip to Cancun, or that new dress you bought last week. I didn't know you thought so little of my business. I never liked what you do. Explosions. I'm embarrassed to tell people what you do. This silenced me. I never knew she felt this way. We always worked hard to succeed and dreamed of retiring when the kids left home. We planned to move to the coast, buy a boat and sail along the coast, stopping at interesting places. It was our dream. Now, with my face flushed, I answered quietly, I'm sorry you think so little of my company. I'll go without you then. Don't worry about it. I left her and went outside to cool off. I knew she was angry, but why did she have to say what she did? To hurt me? Well, she succeeded. She was obviously ashamed of me. I got in the car and drove around the city for 3 hours, ending up at a park I had helped clean up. I walked around, looking at the new trees, benches, and walkways. What I saw made me proud, not ashamed. I got home late, parked in the garage, and closed the door. I sat in the car trying to decide what to do next. This had gone on for too long. I had to do something or our marriage would end. I just didn't know what. Eventually, I went inside to face Joyce and her angry remarks. Where have you been? It's past 8 and the kids have been asking about you. I was outside. Not that you care. I was too angry to stay and argue. Fuck you. I'm tired of this. Furious, I left her to find the children. I sat with them until they went to bed and tucked them in. Maybe I'd have to get used to this. It could become my way of life. It was well after midnight when I went upstairs to bed. Joyce had gone earlier, but that didn't change anything. We hadn't made love since I told her what happened. I hoped she would fall asleep, but she didn't. She stopped me as I walked by on my way to the guest room. Russ, I'm sorry for what I said earlier. I'm not ashamed of what you do. I just said it to hurt you. I'm sorry. Actually, I believe you, Joyce. I see how you act around my employees. I see how you turn away when someone I know sees us in public. I hear you talk to your sister and your mother about how rude my friends are. I just never paid attention before. I didn't know you were so ashamed of me. Now I know it's true. Sorry, Russ. I didn't mean it like that. Okay, Joyce, let's just forget it. I'm really tired tonight, and I don't want to fight anymore. I'll stay in the guest room. With that, I walked past her and headed to the guest room we kept for her parents when they visited. We were cold towards each other for the rest of the week until that dinner night. I had stopped trying to appease her and accepted that she would no longer help me with the business, especially now that I knew how she felt about it. But you know what happened that night, which brings us back to the present, to my departure. Leaving Eileen desperately trying to contact Joyce, I drove off and found a small, secluded hotel with a sign saying rooms available. I checked in, taking a room on the first floor with a large bed and a small kitchen. It cost $80 a night or $500 a week. I paid for a week. I unpacked my clothes, hanging them up and putting the rest in drawers. The room wasn't bad, clean and dry with decent sheets. I checked the bathroom and it was clean too. I didn't need anything else. I sat on the bed, trying to decide what to do next. I was curious about what Joyce would do when she got home. I decided to go to the house and wait a little distance away to see for myself. I left and drove to the house, parking at the bottom of the street. Eileen's car was still there, and I could see the driveway and the front door. The streetlight allowed me to see who was in the car when she got home. Her car was in the garage when I left, so she must have been with someone. I made myself comfortable and began to wait. Only 10 minutes had passed when I saw a car approaching. I ducked down to make the car appear empty and let them drive by. I watched the car pull into our driveway and stop. The headlights went off, and I saw Joyce in the passenger seat and a man in the driver's seat. I couldn't clearly see if it was Ron Mason, but the car looked familiar. For the next few minutes, nothing happened, but I saw the curtains in the house being pulled back several times. Eileen must have been waiting to talk to Joyce. Then I saw Joyce lean over and kiss the man. He hugged her, and they kissed. My anger grew, and I began to contemplate confronting them. Then the front door opened, and Eileen ran down the path. She knocked on the car window. Joyce turned, saw Eileen, and rolled down the window. Eileen screamed at her, waving her arms. Joyce looked worried, jumped out of the car, and ran towards the house. Eileen followed, forgetting about the man in the car. He got out, watched them for a moment, then laughed and drove off. A minute later, my cell phone started ringing. I saw it was Joyce calling from our home phone. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. This time, it was Eileen's phone. I decided the best thing to do was just turn off the phone. I sat there, thinking about what I had seen. I felt the first signs of doubt about my love for Joyce. I left and headed back to the motel. I remembered seeing a bar across the street and decided to go there. I returned to my room, staggering back well after 2 in the morning, feeling numb. Joyce was just a mild irritant now. I slept soundly that night. The next morning, I called the office and spoke with Jerry McCain, my deputy. I told him where I was and asked him to come to my room, bringing the contracts I had started the day before. He was curious but smart enough to do as I asked. I called my lawyer and asked for an appointment. He set it for 1:30. Perfect. When Jerry arrived, I told him about my personal problem and the meeting last night. He could handle the second issue, and the first didn't concern him. I told him so he would know why I'd be gone for the next few weeks. He agreed to manage everything, just as he had done before when I was traveling or on vacation. He was smart enough to forget what I told him about Joyce. As he was leaving, he said, "Boss, how about we blow up that bastard's house? Just a little gas explosion. No one but you and me will know." "Thanks, Jer, but not now. Maybe it will come to that. Then it will just be you and me. Like before. Those were the good times. Why don't you check the records to see what properties this guy owns? It might come in handy." He smiled and left. He was serious, and so was I. My meeting with Saul Steinberg didn't go well. He wasn't happy with my plans to file for divorce. He had information about my business income and Joyce's income, and he didn't like the potential costs. Any divorce must be filed as no fault. The state isn't interested in reasons like adultery. I might be able to sue her lover for alienation of affection, but that would be risky. What if the lover has no money? Big loss. Saul wanted to see if he could work things out to save me money. I told him to prepare something and we'd discuss it later. I asked him to create 2 trust funds for the children and find the best ways to fund them. I could file for guardianship, of course. In this case, infidelity would play a role, but only if I could prove she has terrible morals and endangers the children. Not very likely. I told Saul to call Joyce and find out her lawyer's name. He agreed and said he would call later. I drove back to my motel, went to the bar across the street, and ordered a burger and beer. I decided to stay sober now that my anger had subsided. From now on, I would stay calm. I took a booth, turned on my phone, and checked my call log. 17 calls from Joyce. I deleted them all. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Hello? Russell, where the hell are you?" came the scream in my ear. I looked at the phone and closed the lid. I wouldn't listen to this nonsense. I saw her last night. I knew what she did, and she knew how I felt about it. I had told her clearly before I left. The phone rang twice more before I answered. This time, there was no screaming. "Russell, please tell me where you are. You didn't come home last night, and I was worried. Where are you, honey?" "Joyce, where were you last night? I told you what would happen if you did this. And you did it anyway. So I left, just like I promised. I told you there were 2 choices, and you didn't listen." "Russell, honey, no. I just went with my friends from work. I was angry and needed someone to talk to, that's all. Honestly, honey, now please, just come home." "Sorry, Joyce. A lie isn't the best way to start this. I was sitting down the street when you came home. It wasn't just any friend. And the kiss you gave him wasn't the kind you give to friends. Looks like it's not the first time." You've never been good at lying, Joyce. Saul will call you today. Tell him who you want as your divorce lawyer." With that, I hung up. I was done talking to her lying face. My burger arrived, and I enjoyed it with my beer. I had another beer before heading back to my room. I called Jerry and got an update on work. He told me about a job in Rio that someone wanted us to consider, so I wrote down the name and number and made the call. The next day, I checked in with Jerry and Saul and found out that Joyce was in a panic, calling both of them almost every hour. She was now convinced I was serious and didn't know how to contact me. I didn't give my motel number to anyone, and only Jerry knew where I was. He would never tell Joyce. He didn't really like her, and just avoided her as best he could. It's been 4 days since I left the house. I spent one of those days with Saul and Jerry, and the next 3 days driving around the city, checking on work and past projects. I enjoyed my free time, and the thought of retirement kept coming to mind. Saul and I calculated the value of the business, and it was over 7 figures, enough to allow me to retire in good health, even if I had to share it with Joyce. Both Justin and Julie, our children, were provided for by a trust fund that Saul created and funded. They would be fine, regardless of the fight between Joyce and me. On the 5th day, I decided to call Joyce and try to arrange a time to talk. We had issues to resolve and needed to agree on child custody. This bothered me. I called twice and told the kids I was fine, just very busy. Although I told Eileen I would file for full custody, I wasn't serious. Joyce was a wonderful mother, and the children needed her more than they needed me, and Joyce would never put them in danger. So I called. "Russell, please don't hang up again. I need to see you. You didn't come back last night, and I was worried. Where are you, honey? Please tell me." "Actually, Joyce, I think we really need to talk. When would be a good time for me to come over?" "Any time now. Tonight? I'm here at home just waiting for your call." "Is Ron there? Are you still together?" "Ron was never in the house except for the night you made him leave, and we're not together. It was my mistake, and I'm so sorry." "Okay, I just don't want to run into your lovers when I come over. How about tonight? Can you ask your parents to pick up the kids today?" "Sure. Around 6. I can make dinner." "Don't cook dinner." "Okay, that works. 7 then." I hung up the phone, sat on the bed, and let the tears fall. No matter what she did, I loved her, and it wasn't easy to turn that off. It couldn't end that easily. When I arrived exactly at 7, she was waiting. The door opened before I could touch it. She stood there looking scared and nervous. She stepped aside, and I entered. I went to the kitchen and sat down at the table. Joyce followed me, made us coffee, plain for me with a little sugar and milk for her. She put the cup in front of me and sat down opposite me. She didn't look well. She seemed tired, her hair was combed but dull, and her face was puffy and swollen, probably from crying. Unfortunately, I felt almost nothing while looking at her. I decided to start the conversation. "I contacted Saul about the divorce. He has prepared some preliminary figures that we should discuss. I would like to send them to your lawyer first." "No, Russell, I don't want a divorce. I love you, and I admit I made a big mistake. I'm sorry, Russ, but don't let this mistake ruin our lives and our marriage." "I saw your mistake. It wasn't just a mistake. You promised to get revenge on me and used him for it. I told you what would happen. Now I don't want to hear any more of your lies." "No, Russell, please, dear, I'm sorry. I forgive you. We have to move on for the sake of the children. They don't deserve to pay for my stupidity. You were right. I should have forgiven you and moved on. I'm doing it. I forgive you. Please cancel the divorce and come home." I looked at her and saw that she was scared. But I didn't believe her about her time with Ron Mason. Joyce was not the forgive and forget type. If she promised to take revenge, she did it. I saw some of it, but I didn't know the whole truth. I had suspicions, but not facts, and I started all this with my stupid act. So what should I do? I needed time to find out the truth. "Okay, Joyce. Let me think about it. I'm not sure I believe you, but I did start this. I'll tell Saul to hold off on the divorce while you and I try to work this out." "Thank you, Russ. You won't regret it. We can work this out and get back to the way things were. Come home right now." "Please, not tonight. I need time to think and make decisions. I gave you 2 choices and you tried to make a third. Now I need to decide. I know I screwed up, but I apologized and didn't plan for it. You didn't believe me. I didn't listen until I got my revenge. Now you want to forgive me and have me come home. It makes me wonder what you really did." No, I didn't do anything other than that kiss, and I said I was sorry for that. I realize what it means to be without you. This week has taught me a lesson. I don't want to be without you. Please come home and let's start again. I'll call you, but I don't want to be here tonight. I need to leave. I left immediately before she could start pleading again. I needed to think. I had to decide if I believed her. I needed time alone. I headed back to my bar and had a few cold beers. 2 days passed before I decided to go home and give it a chance. Maybe Joyce had cheated on me, but I didn't know for sure, and it wasn't enough to make me give up. If I screwed up and she did too, maybe we're even. She challenged me and reached my limit, but so what? I loved her and didn't want our marriage to end. So in the end, I decided in favor of my family. Maybe I was wrong, but sue me. Joyce was true to her word. She didn't mention the cheating and did everything she could to show me she had forgiven me. I returned home, and the first night it was almost like our honeymoon. I went back to work, and Joyce surprised me by quitting her job at the real estate agency. She said she didn't want to see Ron Mason anymore, and if she stayed there, she would see him every day. She said the memories of what almost happened were too much for her. I agreed, but I wondered if this was the real reason. The thought running through my head was that Joyce had given up too easily. I knew her well, and when she decided to do something, she did it. Nothing could stop her. She had threatened to cheat on me for revenge, and she never made empty threats. I began to believe more strongly that she had already done it. With that in mind, I started working on a few things since returning home. First, the value of the company. Saul and I tested the waters and got solid estimates of what others were willing to pay. The amount was well over $4 million for the business. The guarantee of all open contracts and the good name we had established in the industry raised the price. We didn't have a lot of concrete and steel, but we had the knowledge and experience. These things can't be bought with money, but they raised the price. I then met with Jerry and several other key people and discussed a possible sale. We worked out a stock buyback plan with Jerry and 7 others that I proposed to the company. We even received letters of intent from several financial institutions. The price was below our best estimate, but I preferred to sell to Jerry. After all, he was an integral part of the company, just like me. He was worth the difference, and loyalty was part of it too. Finally, I spoke with Buddy Zaragoza, a leading security expert with whom we sometimes worked. There were often situations where security was needed to make sure the buildings we were going to demolish were empty and remained that way. Homeless people liked to return to empty buildings and weren't very good at reading signs. Security was so well equipped for sound that they could hear someone breathing in some areas. I made some arrangements with him. It had been almost a month since I returned home, and I had to admit that everything was going very well. Joyce continued to be a loving wife and wonderful mother. At home, she helped in both the kitchen and bedroom. Meals became more fun with the kids, and we talked and laughed. I felt more confident, but I had doubts and wanted to be sure. I arranged for my security contact to come to the house one night when I took Joyce and the kids out to dinner. We went to a pizzeria, ate pizza, and drank cold drinks. The kids were delighted, and Joyce was glad for an evening where she didn't have to cook. We were gone for almost 2 hours, more than enough time for Buddy. When we got home, I spent an hour trying to find what Buddy had done, but I didn't see anything. He was good, that's for sure. Almost 2 weeks passed before Buddy called me at the office. He wanted me to come to him. He had something I needed to hear. I said, "I'll be there in an hour." I sat at the table, my heart pounding with fear. What did he have? Was this what I was afraid of? Did she do it again? More of these thoughts ran through my head. By the time I left, my stomach was hurting, but I had to go and find out the truth. When I got there, Buddy took me to a small meeting room equipped with several monitors and 2 large speakers. He sat me down at the table, walked over to a small control panel, did something there, and then sat down next to me. What you're about to hear is a conversation between your wife and her sister, Eileen. This was last night. Nothing interesting happened before, and I was hoping it would stay that way. But listen for yourself. We listened to your phones as you agreed, and we have both sides of the conversation. I can fast forward so you can hear the important parts. He pointed the remote control at the console and pressed a button. And after dinner, when we got into the car, he invited me to go for a ride with him. What did you say? You didn't go with him, did you? Yeah, I went. I was so mad at Russell that I just wanted to stay away. The dinner was fun, and Ron is a great listener, but it was over so quickly, I just wanted to stay away. Well, nothing happened, right? You didn't do anything with him. We went to the park at 5th and Concord. You know, the park where we take Justin and Julie. We parked behind some empty cars. We just talked for a while, and then we kissed. Damn it, sister, tell me you stopped there. Just a kiss, nothing more. No, we didn't stop there. Damn. Well, what happened next? She continued her story. I stood up, feeling sick. Buddy stopped the recording and led me to the bathroom. I went in, vomited, and stayed there until the cramping stopped. I rinsed my face with cold water and leaned over the sink, trying to calm myself. I didn't want to listen anymore, but I knew I had to. I walked back out to finish listening to my wife's betrayal. Well, Ross, need to hear more? No, it's the same. I'll take the tape and listen to it alone. I don't need to humiliate myself in front of you anymore. Well, no, but there's one more part you need to hear. There's no sex. Okay, fine, just play it. Buddy put on his headphones, listened for a few seconds, then stopped. Here it is. You need to hear this. It started with Eileen talking to Joyce. But why did you do it? Why, after Russell threatened you? Did you want to end your marriage? No, but you see, that's the point. He cheated on me and it made me so angry I couldn't stand it. I know he said it was an accident and he was drunk, but so what? He did it. I had to take revenge. Then he humiliated me in front of Ron that night. So I got even angrier and knew I had to do something to get back at him. The only difference was that he wasn't supposed to find out. But see, I knew I cheated on him with Ron Mason behind his back, and he would never have found out. It was my secret. That's why I can accept Russell now, because it's his first time in his car. But what if he finds out? What then? What will he do? Divorce me? He loves me as much as I love him. He would never do that. We love each other too much to divorce. Anyway, he won't do it because of Justin and Julie. I don't know, sister. I heard him that night when he came home. He didn't look like he was afraid of losing you. He was furious and wanted you to leave. Trust me. Don't ever let him find out. He won't find out. That's why I quit my job. So I wouldn't have to see Ron every day. I couldn't stand it. It's good that it's over. I'm really worried about you. If he finds out, you'll lose too much. Just forget it, please. It's better. Who said it's over? I'll probably do it again. Buddy stopped the recording and leaned back, watching me. Well, that sums it up, doesn't it? It's worse than I suspected. I stood up, testing my shaking legs, and knew they could hold me. I asked Buddy to give me the recording, and he handed me the CD. I put it in my briefcase. I wanted to make a copy at home before giving it to Saul. I drove back to the office, spent some time working on a few ideas, and then drove home. I needed to think and plan as I listened to my loving wife's words destroying our marriage. I knew what I wanted to do. Now everything was simple. These words made me realize our marriage was over and that I no longer loved her. Not for real. I was still attached to her. But now that I knew the depth of her deceit and betrayal, I felt the love fade. I pulled into the garage and entered the house to be with my family. I was going to enjoy these next few weeks, knowing it wouldn't happen again. There would be no change in my behavior until I was ready. While I was there, I would play with my kids and spend as much time with them as possible and plan to have sex with Joyce, but without love anymore. Joyce and I continued to live as if nothing had changed. If she noticed a difference in the bedroom, she didn't comment on it, perhaps because she was trying not to start talking about the night she left. I didn't mention it either because I didn't want to discuss it. We spent 3 months as husband and wife, mother and father, but not as lovers. At least from my side, I simply treated her now as a traitor. I continued to monitor calls in the house using the equipment Buddy left me. The recorder was now hidden in the garage in the corner of my tool rack. Joyce never went near the tools, and Justin was not allowed to use them. So it was safe there, and I would check it in the evenings, pretending I was working on some project. After 3 months, Joyce hadn't mentioned Ron Mason once, and I began to wonder what she was waiting for. While looking through phone records, I came across one noteworthy call. Joyce called Eileen to see if she could look after the kids the following week. It turns out Joyce was planning to meet Ron for dinner. When Eileen asked her directly about this, Joyce acted flirtatiously, giggled, and hinted, but did not directly confirm that she intended to resume an intimate relationship with Ron. I was surprised that Eileen was persistent in discouraging Joyce from seeing Ron, given her dislike of me, and Joyce was very careful in her statements. She did not mention her colleagues or Ron by name. The reason she said his name for the first time intrigued me. I decided to use this information to put some pressure on Joyce. My opportunity came during dinner the next evening. It was Friday, and I came home early, which was rare for me. I worked very hard on some proposals and spent several evenings working at home. But now these assessments were almost completed, and I could afford to rest a little. Dinner was finished, and Joyce and Julie were washing the dishes while Justin and I dried. It was a routine we tried to maintain with the children, making them part of the process. They didn't get tired of it, and we often talked about our plans and days. This is what happened that night. Russ, do you have any plans for next Wednesday? I want to go to dinner with the girls from work. I called Eileen, and she can babysit until you get home. I won't be long, and we'll leave around 4:30. You don't mind, do you? I didn't know you kept in touch with your former colleagues. Why do you suddenly want to go to dinner with them? Some special occasion? Joyce seemed nervous and clearly didn't like answering questions. So instead of answering, she decided to attack. Why should this be a problem for you? I haven't gone anywhere for the last 3 months since I quit my job. I just want to see some of my friends. Do you have a problem with that? No, I have no problem. Will Ron be there? Her reaction was too quick and too angry to be convincing. Of course not. I told you, it's with the girls. Her face was angry, and she looked down at the sink and the water everywhere but at me. Enough. She just kept lying, and thanks to the recording, I was sure of that. Joyce was a terrible liar and became nervous and anxious when she lied. It was a classic case, and I got what I wanted to know. Even though I put pressure on her and made her nervous, she didn't want to stop. I decided to give up. It just wasn't worth it. Okay, that suits me. I'll be home at the usual time and relieve Eileen. Go and have fun. I finished drying the dishes and went to watch the news. I knew she was planning to meet Ron for dinner and then spend the evening with him. If he was smart, he already had a room booked and would have taken her there. I expected her to meet him at either the Ramada or the Holiday Inn. Both hotels had pretty decent restaurants and bars and rooms for rent. I wanted to check the recorder tonight since she would probably call him soon, maybe right after I went to the garage. Joyce came in after the kids had gone to play video games in the playroom and sat next to me. She leaned her head on my shoulder and began stroking my hand. I let her do it to see what she would do. Sorry, Russ. I know you still don't trust me very much. But honestly, honey, it's just dinner with the girls. Ron won't be there because he wasn't invited. You can check if you want. The reservation is in my name. There's no need. I don't want to check on you every time you go out. If I have to do that, we won't have a real marriage. I know I screwed up, and I know you were angry. So it's my fault that you did what you did. I'm just glad it didn't go beyond that kiss. I can forgive it. Especially now that you've forgiven me, right? Of course I did. I told you that. And I hope I showed it. We've been having a lot of fun in the bedroom lately. I see that you have forgiven me. I have forgiven, and I know you would never betray me like that. You love your family too much to do that. I made a mistake, but it shouldn't cost us our marriage and our life together. I just wish I had the strength and integrity that you showed in controlling your actions with Ron. I trust you completely. The momentary tension in her body would have been a clear sign, but when her hand stopped for a moment, it was enough to convince me that she was definitely going to cheat on me again. All I could do was wait for her to do it in reality. Thank you for your trust. I won't let you down. It was so obvious she was lying to me, and I wasn't sure how she could love so much after the words I said. She was supposed to be a cold, calculating person. Why hadn't I noticed this before? I let it go and let her feel like she cleared my doubts. It's a shame Joyce wasn't smarter. Perhaps we could save our lives together and save our marriage. But she was too selfish and too stupid to understand that what I did and what she did were two different things. I was sorry and promised not to do it again. But she was happy about what she had done and planned to do it again. Her anger blinded her actions. She justified her actions by blaming me, as I expected. Joyce called right after I went into the garage and closed the door. I saw the lights come on and the recorder turn on, and I waited. It only took 5 minutes before it went off. The call ended. Joyce was probably putting the kids to bed at this time, so I took the recorder, rewound it to the beginning of the call, and listened. Hello? Hi, Ron, this is Joyce. Hi, honey. I've been waiting for your call. Are you ready to meet again? I can't wait to see you again. Well, that's why I'm calling. I'll be free from 4:30 on Wednesday. I made a reservation at the Ramada for dinner and was hoping you could meet me there. Why have dinner? I'll take a room and we'll spend the whole evening in bed. I have a few ideas on how we can spend our time. Sounds like fun to me. Last time was fantastic, so I hope you stop that on Wednesday. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Trust me, I'm counting on it. I'll meet you in the lobby around 4:25. We'll have about 2 hours or a little more. See you then? That was the whole conversation. Nothing more. Just confirmation of the date and memory of the night she committed her first infidelity. She lied to me about dinner and about Ron. And she did it knowingly, knowing what she planned to do. This wasn't revenge. It was Joyce planning to make me a fool, staying at home with the kids while she was with her lover. It was Joyce getting the better of me and feeling superior. This was her secret. This was Joyce at her worst. I knew her well, but I never suspected she was capable of such anger and cruelty. It was too much for a loving relationship. If this is what I could expect when she's angry, we have no future. I inserted the CD into the end of the recorder and pressed the copy button. Her conversation was copied directly onto the CD with the date and time. Once it was complete, I put it in an envelope to give to Saul. The weekend passed without any more calls or lies, except when she said she loved me again. There was no love on my part, but she didn't even notice. On Monday, I arrived at the office and called Jerry to discuss our plans. I had established the identity and bank accounts in the name of Juan Ramirez, a Mexican citizen. It cost me over $10,000, but now I had all the necessary documents, including a Mexican passport and ID. I even had a fake ID card and driver's license in that name, and since I spoke Spanish fluently, no one asked questions. It's amazing what you can get for money. All funds in this account were held at the Bank of Mexico branch in New York. Mr. Ramirez had access to these funds in Mexico using a fake identity. I opened an account and deposited $1,000 to activate it. On Tuesday, I called Saul, and Jerry and I went to see him. Saul gave me the name of the lawyer who would handle this case. This was necessary because I didn't want Saul involved in what was about to happen. I made a deal with Jerry to sell the company for a certain amount, but this amount was to be kept in a separate file, accessible only to him and his partners. We made 2 notes of the deal, one for Saul and one for Jerry, who would keep it secret for now. We had worked out this deal some time ago, and now it was just a matter of finalizing it. Jerry and I went to the new lawyer's office. There, we transferred money from a reserve account set up for Jerry and the 7 others to whom I offered the company to Juan Ramirez's account. The amount was $2.5 million USD. The attorney prepared a transfer receipt and gave it to Jerry, along with a signed deed transferring ownership from me to Mr. Ramirez for 80% of Cranston Demolitions, Inc. After completing this, we returned to Saul, who then transferred money from the same account to my personal account at a local bank. This amount was $350,000. The documents indicated the transfer of 20% of the company to Jerry's name. This time, the receipt was attached to the deed to the building where my company was located and to all shares and funds in corporate accounts. My name was removed from the register of owners and replaced with Jerry's name and his charter. Jerry and his new corporation were now the owners of Cranston Demolitions, Inc., so Saul could confidently say the transaction amount was $350,000. I handed Saul the prepared CD and went with Jerry to the office to complete the transfer. We called key employees and informed them that the transaction was completed. From that point on, I was unemployed and no longer a boss. It was sad, but also timely. I had built this company from the ground up, but now it was someone else's responsibility. After a quick round of congratulations, I left to finalize my plans. I checked my balance at the Bank of Mexico in New York. The money was in the account and would be confirmed by the end of the working day on Wednesday. Juan Ramirez would become a multi-millionaire. He already owned a beautiful home in Puerto Vallarta, a fully restored 1987 Gulfstar yacht, and had 3 employees awaiting his return. I intended to join them as soon as possible. I felt good as I drove home that night. I sold my company to Jerry and his corporation for $2,850,000, but only $350,000 would show up on the transfer record. The rest of the money was in an account under a different name and couldn't be traced. Jerry was fine, as he had receipts for 100% of the company for the full sale price. So all the records showed that $350,000 was the amount I received. I openly deposited this amount into my account. The rest of the money was legally transferred abroad and couldn't be traced in the event of a divorce. Saul was preparing my estate for the upcoming divorce, so he counted $350,000 as my share of the business. This was added to my share of the house and property. The rest of the money disappeared, and Joyce would never see it again. From my perspective, since this money was part of our retirement plans, and she decided to go her own way by cheating on me with Ron Mason, she no longer had a right to this money. I offered her a choice: divorce or forgiveness. If she had chosen divorce, I would have given her a fair share of everything we had. It was my fault, and I would have accepted it. But not like this. She chose to cheat for revenge, just to feel better about herself. Her actions changed our future plans, my plans, and they no longer concerned her. I actually made love to Joyce that night, knowing it would be the last time for me. I loved her for so long that breaking up was more difficult than I expected, but she left me no choice. Although I could have stopped her by revealing what I knew, it wouldn't have changed anything. Her intention to cheat was obvious, and she would eventually do it to get back at me for stopping her this time. Joyce made her position clear in conversations with Eileen and Ron. On Wednesday morning, Joyce was especially loving when she walked me to work. I knew she was happy, and a wave of sadness washed over me. I loved her for so long that the end was harder than I expected, but she left me no choice. Although I could have stopped her by revealing what I knew, it wouldn't have changed anything. Her intention to cheat was obvious, and she would eventually do it to get back at me for stopping her this time. Joyce made her position clear in conversations with Eileen and Ron. I left the car with Jerry and took a taxi to the airport, where I made a reservation on a flight to Rio for that evening. Once there, I planned to take a private, unofficial flight back to Mexico and my new home. I had time, so I spent it with Saul to check the final documents. The divorce papers were completed and would be delivered to Joyce on Thursday morning. I renegotiated the terms, making sure Joyce received all the money in the bank accounts, now over $400,000. The trust funds for the children were already fully funded, and the money I left Joyce would cover all their needs. She'd probably have to go back to work to stay comfortable, but so be it. In addition, I set up an account to pay Joyce $5,000 a month in child support, which would continue as long as the children's needs were met and she remained unmarried. Once she married again or the children turned 18, the support would stop. It was hard to do, and I struggled with it until everything was finalized. The hardest part was leaving my children, but I had no other choice. I wrote a letter explaining what I was doing, but not why. I simply told them that their mother and I had decided we could no longer live together, so I had to leave. I promised to keep in touch with them and said that sometime in the future we would meet and they could spend time with me if Joyce allowed. My real problem was that the money was in Mexico under the name Juan Ramirez, so I needed to stay there to enjoy it. Maybe someday I would find a way to meet them and even bring them to Mexico to spend time on the yacht and at my villa. Somehow I would find a way. If I told Joyce where I was, she would be so angry that she would find a way to come after me. I couldn't let that happen. I had lunch and called my friends, telling them I was going abroad for a while and would contact them later when I returned. It was unlikely, but it established my planned departure. I spent the rest of the day at a small bar and grill, drinking enough to feel relaxed, but not so much that I got drunk. I was waiting for time to pass. I had one more thing to do before I left for good. When the clock behind the bar showed 5 p.m., I went to the phone booth at the back of the bar, closed the door, and dialed the Ramada number. I asked to speak to Mr. Ron Mason's room and told the operator he was hard of hearing, so let the phone ring. She confirmed he was there and connected the call. I waited. Finally, he answered on the 8th ring. "Hello? Who the hell is this? Oh, shit." He sounded out of breath. "Hey, Ron, this is Russell Cranston. Don't hang up. If you do, I'll come up to your room and break your neck. I think you're with my wife, Joyce, right now. Hand her the phone." Silence on the other end. Then I heard my wife's angry voice in the background, asking Ron who it was. He whispered something to her, and I waited. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm here alone. I have no idea where your wife is. You're wrong. No, you are wrong. Ask my wife about my past. She will confirm I'm telling the truth. Now listen carefully and remember, if you don't hand the phone to my wife right now, I will go up to your room and break your neck. I warned you what would happen if you didn't listen. Now I'm angry enough to do it. Give her the phone and hope I don't come for you. There was silence again, but I could hear him covering the phone as he told her what I said. I waited, knowing Joyce knew I wasn't joking. I thought I heard a muffled scream, then the sound of clothing and the creaking of bed springs before Joyce answered the phone. Listen, Russell, it's not what you think. I know it looks bad, but we're just talking, catching up, that's all. I'll come home right now and we can talk. It's not what you think, darling. Please trust me, okay? I'll be home in a few minutes, Russ, and we'll work it out. It's not what you think. Sorry, Joyce, but it is exactly what I think. I tapped our phones and heard you planning to meet that jerk at the Ramada. I heard you telling Eileen about the first time with him. Remember when you said it was even better than with me? I know everything, Joyce, and I told you what would happen. Now it's too late for your lies. No, Russ, please, honey, I'm sorry. I'm coming home right now and this will never happen again. Ron means nothing to me. I love only you. Please wait for me. I'll leave right now and be home in a few minutes. Please, Russ, I'm sorry. Joyce, Saul will contact you tomorrow morning with the terms of the divorce. As for me, you won't see me again. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. I tried, Joyce. I really did. I apologized for my mistake and promised it would never happen again. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You had to get back at me. Well, congratulations. You won, Joyce. Russ, what about the children? You can't leave them. They love you and will miss you. Can you be that cruel? I don't see you caring about them now, Joyce. Did you think about them when you were with Ron Mason? Don't try to blame me, Joyce. You ruined our marriage. All you had to do was forgive me. That's all. But you couldn't. Your rage drove you crazy. I heard her crying hysterically, trying to stop me from saying something she didn't want to hear. I heard her screaming at poor Ron, telling him to leave and never come back. Poor guy. He took what she offered and didn't risk anything. He thought he was the smartest, but he forgot that I warned him, and he didn't listen. He will pay for this mistake. I'll call the kids and explain why I left. You can tell them anything, but you better take care of them, Joyce, or I'll come back for you. And you won't like it. I don't want to see any of your lovers in this house. I made sure someone will look after you, so don't make me angry, Joyce. You know what I'm capable of. I'm leaving the country tonight and you won't hear from me again. All contact from now on will be through Saul. Goodbye, Joyce. While she was yelling for me to wait, I hung up. One more final call to Jerry, and I was done with Joyce and all that mess. An hour after my call to Joyce, I was on my way to the airport. 3 flights and less than 10 hours later, I was in my new home. A week later, I received a copy of the local newspaper from my villa in Puerto Vallarta. It detailed an explosion and complete destruction of several buildings in the north of the city that occurred 2 days after I left the country. According to the newspaper, each one appeared to be a gas leak that had somehow ignited, causing a huge explosion. Fortunately, no one was injured. The article stated the buildings were owned by Ron Mason, a local realtor, and deliberate arson was suspected. When asked to comment, Mr. Paul Mason said he believed the acts were carried out by a local bomb expert, but he had no evidence. According to investigators, the man in question was overseas and could not have been responsible. The explosions were determined to be intentional, and Mr. Mason is the only suspect. If convicted, he faces 30 years in prison. I read the article several times and couldn't help but laugh every time. God bless you, Jerry. Saul contacted me several times, saying Joyce wanted to call me and find a way to contact me. But I told Saul to let her know I had no desire to talk to her. She threatened to fight the divorce, but Saul told her that he had several CDs of conversations confirming her intention to cheat. If she continued to fight, he would make those records public to the court and change the reason for the divorce. He also mentioned the plan to sue her company for failing to enforce moral standards, naming her and Ron Mason as accomplices. She gave up, and the divorce went through in 60 days. I counted each one. I drove to a small private airport a few miles from my villa to meet the plane due to arrive at 2 p.m. I parked the car, entered the small building that served as the terminal, and checked the time. I nodded to a few visitors who knew me. I arrived a little early, but that was okay. I grabbed a Corona at the bar and found a seat near the window where I could watch the planes arrive. The kids were on a private flight from Mexico City to this small private airport. This was their third trip, and Joyce believed they were in Mexico City, where I was supposed to live. I would take them and spend a week with them. Jason and Julie knew where I actually lived and why I had to play this little charade. Jason was almost 18 now and could live with either of us, but he wanted to go to school in the States, and I understood. Julie was 16 and wanted to stay with her mother. I had no problem with that. I just wanted them to know me and know that I still loved them, but I didn't want Joyce to know anything about my life here. When they first came, Joyce's sister Eileen was with them. At first, I was angry and worried that she would find out the truth and ruin my first visit with the kids. But after talking to her, I changed my mind. She wasn't mad at me or blamed me for leaving Joyce. She told me she was glad I did it, that Joyce needed the shock of losing me to see what she was doing. After talking privately with my children, I decided she should join these visits from now on. After the first visit, when they swore to secrecy, after I brought them to my villa, Jason and Julie were happy to keep my secret from their mother. Part of this was because they knew why I divorced Joyce and resented her for it. But they also loved the boat, the horses I kept near the villa, and the staff of 3 who were happy to please 2 teenagers. They also enjoyed having a rich gringo dad. They swore to contact me only on my cell phone and only when away from Joyce. We made an agreement, and everyone respected it. As for Eileen, she also agreed. But we had a special arrangement that she seemed happy with. The plane landed. They got off and ran to the terminal where they knew I was waiting. It was great to see them all, and I stood up, ready to hug and kiss them. I met them at the door, and it was as if time had simply melted away. It felt like just yesterday they were here with me. I noticed Jason had grown another 2 inches and added 10 pounds to his lean frame, and Julie was starting to look more like a young woman than a child. They greeted me and ran to get their luggage. I kept clothes for them in the villa, and they could buy whatever they needed for the week. I watched them leave with fatherly pride. I turned to their fellow traveler. Were there any problems during the trip? Is Joyce still convinced you're in Mexico City? Yes. I told her we were on the way so she could call me on my cell phone. It's the only number she has. Although she hates it, she knows she has no choice. This way, she won't know where we are. Really happy. Wonderful. Although I doubt it will make much difference now that it's been almost 2 years since I left. By the way, how is she doing? Not much better. She's still trying to convince herself that you'll be back soon. She's waiting for you, Russ. You know that. She doesn't date anyone. She goes to work at a new place, comes home, and spends all her time with the children. She never leaves the house and has no real friends. She has no life. This is the life she chose. That's what she wanted when she decided Ron was better than me. She knows it was a huge mistake and has been going to counseling for the last 2 years to learn to control her anger. She wanted revenge, not Ron Mason, maybe. What about you? What do you want? What's on your mind? You know what I'm thinking? I know for sure that you are better than Ron Mason, and I fully expect you to come to me as soon as the children fall asleep. Am I sleeping in the same room? The one next to you with the adjoining door? Absolutely, and I will try to live up to your expectations. You probably won't get much sleep tonight or for the next few nights. This is a promise. I expect you to keep your promise. At that moment, the children came running back with 3 overnight bags. Jason put one down so I could carry it. Here is Aunt Eileen's bag. This one you can carry. With a wink and a tap of his knuckles, my son Jason let me know that he was fully aware of our little secret, mine and Eileen's. She never seemed to hate me like I thought she did. She was just jealous of her little sister. I never knew. Am I happy now? I don't know yet. Time will tell. Even though I see them as often as I can, I miss my kids. And I miss Joyce. After all, she was my only love for almost 18 years. And Eileen. We are together only for sex, and our relationship is not going anywhere. She knows it, and so do I. She wants me to go back to Joyce, but she knows I can't do that. At least not now, if ever. And there are some very nice women here who would just like to meet the handsome gringo living in the villa on the hill and help him get over the American woman. Maybe I'll just let them. As for Joyce, the consequences are just a bitch. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.